The call came in right when I was in the middle of a briefing, not a casual meeting. This was a closed-door session with 3 officers and a civilian contractor going over updates to a medical monitoring system we were rolling out across multiple bases. The kind of meeting where phones stay face down and nobody interrupts unless it matters. My phone buzzed once. I ignored it. Then again, and again. I glanced at the screen. Brittany. I let it ring. 30 seconds later, it lit up again. Same name. That was unusual. Brittany didn't call unless she needed something or wanted something. I excused myself for a minute, stepped out into the hallway, and answered. Her voice came in fast like she'd been waiting. Finally. I've been calling you. I'm at work, I said. What's going on? It's about Christmas. That already sounded like trouble. What about it? A short pause like she was picking her words, but not really trying that hard. Look, don't make this a whole thing, okay? I just need you to not come this year. I didn't respond right away. I leaned against the wall outside the briefing room and watched a couple of junior officers walk past. Not come, I repeated. Yeah, just skip it. It's not a big deal. Brittany, it's Christmas. I know what it is, she snapped. Then she softened her tone just enough to sound reasonable. It's just, Kevin's coming. There it was. Okay, I said. And he's important, she said like that explained everything. He works with military hospitals now. He's consulting with some DoD programs. He's kind of a big deal. I let that sit for a second. And me being there is a problem because... Another pause. This one shorter. Because you don't exactly know how to present yourself. I almost smiled at that. Present myself. You know what I mean, she said quickly. You're always so serious. You don't talk much. You don't fit in with that kind of crowd. That kind of crowd. Kevin's used to people who have their lives together, she continued. Doctors, specialists, people who actually built something. That part was interesting. I see. And I just don't want anything awkward, she added. I've told him a lot about our family and I want everything to match. Clean, normal, no weird vibes. No weird vibes, I repeated. Yeah. So let me make sure I understand, I said. You want me to skip Christmas because I don't fit the image you've built. It's not about you, she said immediately. It's about the situation. That's usually how people say it's about you. Brittany, look, your life's just a mess right now. Okay, she cut in. You don't even try to make it look like you're doing well. You barely talk about your job. You're always busy with whatever it is you do. It just doesn't look good. There it was. Clean, direct. Your life's a mess. I pushed off the wall and walked a few steps down the hallway just to move. And you think me showing up would embarrass you. I didn't say embarrass. You said it without saying it. She didn't deny it. You're making this dramatic, she said. I'm just asking for one holiday. That's it. Next year, whatever, we can all hang out, no big deal. Right. And honestly, she added, lowering her voice like she was trying to be helpful, it's better for you too. You won't have to deal with questions about your job or your situation. My situation. That was new. Before I could respond, I heard movement on her end. Then my mother's voice came through. Honey, are you on the phone with her? Yeah, I got her, Brittany said. She's being difficult. Let me talk to her. There was a shuffle. Then my mom's voice came in soft and careful. Hi, sweetheart. Hi, Mom. I heard what Brittany said. We just wanted to talk to you about Christmas. Sounds like you already did. A small sigh on her end. We're not trying to hurt you, she said. We just think it might be better if you sit this one out. Just this year. I closed my eyes for a second. Better for who? For everyone, she said. Brittany's excited about this relationship. It's serious. We don't want anything to complicate things. By complicate, you mean me. That's not what I said. It's what you meant. Silence. Then my dad's voice faint in the background. What's she saying? She's upset, my mom answered, still on the line. Of course she was. I waited. No one corrected anything. No one pushed back on Brittany. No one said, that's not right. Just quiet. That was the part that landed. Not what Brittany said. That was expected. The silence was new. I opened my eyes and looked down the hallway. Same base, same walls, same routine. Nothing had changed. Okay, I said. My mom paused. Okay. You've made your point, I said. I won't come. There was a shift in her tone. Relief almost. Thank you for understanding. Sure. We'll do something together another time, she added quickly. Just us. No pressure. Of course. Brittany's voice came back on. See, that wasn't so hard. I didn't respond. Thanks for being cool about it, she said. This just makes everything easier. For you, I said. She laughed like I'd made a joke. Exactly. I ended the call. For a few seconds, I just stood there, phone still in my hand. Then I went back into the briefing room. No one asked what the call was about. They didn't need to. I picked up right where I left off, walked them through the next phase of the rollout, answered questions, made a few adjustments to the timeline. Same tone. Same pace. The meeting wrapped up 40 minutes later. As people started packing up, one of the contractors, new guy hadn't been around long, looked at me and said, "Ma'am, that system you're pushing, it's going to save a lot of lives." "That's the idea," I said. He nodded like he meant it. After they left, I went back to my office and closed the door. It wasn't a big office. Functional, clean. A desk, a couple of chairs, a wall with certifications, deployment photos, and a few framed documents most people outside the military wouldn't recognize. Nothing about it screamed impressive. That was fine. I set my phone down on the desk and finally looked at it. 3 missed calls. 1 text from Brittany. "Glad you get it." I didn't reply. Instead, I pulled up my calendar for the rest of the week. Back-to-back meetings, system reviews, coordination calls with medical teams. And then 3 days after Christmas, one entry that had been sitting there for a while. Consultation. DOD Medical Program, lead doctor Kevin Park. I stared at the name for a second. Then I closed the calendar. No reaction. No adjustment. Just another meeting. I picked up the folder for the next briefing and got back to work. I flipped the folder open and started marking changes on the timeline like nothing had happened. That was the thing about my job. It didn't pause because your family decided you were an inconvenience. Systems still had to run. People still depended on decisions being made on time, not when you felt ready. So I stayed focused. Adjusted deployment phases. Reassigned 2 review checkpoints. Flagged a delay in one of the testing units that would have gone unnoticed if someone wasn't paying attention. By the time I looked up again, an hour had passed. No one in that building knew I'd just been uninvited from Christmas by my own family. And honestly, even if they did, it wouldn't have changed anything. Out here, nobody cared about your holiday plans. They cared if you could do your job. That was always the difference. Back home, everything was about how things looked. Out here, it was about whether things worked. I leaned back in my chair for a second, staring at the wall across from my desk. A couple of framed photos. One from a deployment years ago. Dusty, sun-bleached, everyone squinting into the camera. Another from a ceremony promotion day. Not a big crowd. Just the people who needed to be there. No one from my family had shown up for that one. They said they were busy. I didn't push it. That had kind of been the pattern. They never really asked what I did, not in a real way. They'd ask surface-level questions. "Are you still in Virginia?" or, "So what exactly is your job again?" but never enough to actually understand the answer. And I didn't go out of my way to explain it. Partly because it was complicated, mostly because I could tell they weren't that interested. To them, military meant one thing. Either you were deployed somewhere dangerous, or you were sitting behind a desk doing paperwork. There wasn't much in between. And since I wasn't constantly talking about combat zones or dramatic stories, they filed me under the second category. Desk job. Stable. Quiet. Nothing impressive. Meanwhile, Brittany's life was easy to understand. Pharmaceutical sales. Nice apartment. Social circle that made sense. Photos that looked good online. You didn't need a breakdown or a clearance level to understand what she did. You just saw it, and that was enough. I picked up my phone again, not to text her back, just to check something. Her profile popped up at the top of my recent messages. I tapped it. A new post had gone up about 20 minutes ago. Of course it had. Brittany didn't wait for anything. The photo was exactly what you'd expect. Soft lighting, clean kitchen, wine glasses, Kevin next to her, arm around her shoulder. Both of them smiling like they'd already decided how this story was going to go. Caption, "Early Christmas dinner with someone special." Comments were already stacking up. "Finally, he looks amazing. You guys are perfect together." Perfect. That word came up a lot with her. Perfect outfit, perfect timing, perfect relationship, perfect image. I scrolled a little further. Another post from earlier that week. New dress. Another dinner. Same tone. Everything curated. Everything controlled. I locked my phone and set it face down again. She wasn't doing anything unusual. She was just doing what she always did. Building a version of her life that made sense to other people. And anything that didn't fit that version got removed. Simple as that. I stood up and walked over to the window. The base stretched out below vehicles moving in and out, people crossing between buildings, routine that didn't care about anyone's personal drama. I'd spent years in places where routine was the only thing keeping people alive. Afghanistan had a way of stripping things down to what mattered. No one cared how you presented yourself. No one cared what your job sounded like at a party. They cared if you showed up when things went wrong. I still remembered one night years back. A kid. Maybe 19. Cardiac issue no one caught in time. Vitals looked fine until they weren't. By the time we realized what was happening, we were already behind. That feeling sticks with you, not the chaos. The moment right before it, when everything looks normal and it isn't. That's the part you don't forget. That's the part that changes how you work, how you think, how you decide what matters. I pushed that memory aside and walked back to my desk. Opened my laptop again. There was still work to do. Always was. A message popped up from one of my team leads. "Ma'am, we've got updated data from the pilot site. Want me to send it now or wait until tomorrow's review?" "Send it now," I typed back. Seconds later, files started coming in. Charts, reports, notice from the field, real information, real outcomes, the kind of things nobody in my family ever asked about. Not because they didn't care about me, they just didn't know how to value what they couldn't immediately understand. And I stopped trying to make them understand a long time ago. It was easier that way. Cleaner, less disappointing. I worked through the data for the next couple of hours, making adjustments, flagging inconsistencies, setting up follow-ups. At some point, I realized I hadn't thought about the call in a while. Not because it didn't matter, but because I'd already made a decision. I wasn't going. That part was settled. No argument, no last-minute change. Just done. I closed the last file and leaned back again, this time letting the silence sit for a moment. It wasn't anger. Not exactly. More like clarity. Like something that had been obvious for a while, finally lined up in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. They didn't see me. Not really. And for the first time, I wasn't trying to fix that. I reached for my calendar again, scrolling through the next few days. Meetings, reviews, coordination calls. And then it was there again. December 27th. Consultation DOD. Medical program. Lead Dr. Kevin Park. I hovered over the entry for a second. No emotion attached to it, just a fact. A meeting that had been scheduled weeks before any of this happened. A name that 3 days ago wouldn't have meant anything. Now it did. Not because of him, but because of what he represented. The version of the world Brittany wanted to belong to. The version she thought I didn't fit into. I clicked into the meeting details. Time, location, attendees. Everything in order. Everything already set in motion. I closed the window and shut my laptop. No changes. No cancellations. Just another item on the schedule. And for now, that was all it needed to be. I reopened the laptop and pulled up the full program overview. Not because I needed to, but because it helped me reset. Everything made more sense when it was in front of me. Numbers didn't lie. Systems either worked or they didn't. You didn't have to guess where you stood. People were different. I scrolled through the latest performance reports from one of our pilot sites. Cardiac monitoring data, response times, intervention windows. The kind of information that looked dry if you didn't know what you were looking at, and life-changing if you did. A flagged case caught my eye. Post-surgical complication. Early signs picked up 6 hours before symptoms became obvious. Intervention team alerted ahead of time. Outcome stabilized. 6 hours. That's the kind of margin that doesn't exist unless someone builds it. I leaned forward, reading through the notes. The system had caught a pattern that wouldn't have triggered a standard alert. Subtle shifts. Nothing dramatic on the surface. Exactly the kind of thing that gets missed. Exactly the kind of thing I'd seen before. That same feeling hit again, the one from years ago. That moment where everything looks fine until it isn't. We built this program to close that gap, not to look impressive, not to sell anything, to give people a chance they wouldn't otherwise have. I added a note to the file, flagged it for review, then moved on. This was the part no one at home ever saw. Not the work itself, the weight of it, the decisions that didn't come with applause or recognition. Just quiet outcomes that either worked or didn't. Brittany wouldn't understand any of this, not because she wasn't capable, because she'd never needed to. Her world didn't require her to think about consequences in that way. If something went wrong, it was inconvenient. Out here, if something went wrong, it stayed with you. I closed the file and leaned back again, letting my eyes rest for a second. When people hear military, they imagine two extremes: combat zones or paperwork. They don't see everything in between. They don't see the coordination, the planning, the systems that run behind the scenes to keep things from falling apart in the first place. They don't see how many people it takes to make one decision happen correctly. And they definitely don't see how much responsibility sits on top of those decisions. I stood up and grabbed the folder from earlier, flipping through the printed materials we'd be using for the upcoming consultation. Program structure, implementation phases, integration points with hospital systems. Everything had to be clear, not simplified clear. There's a difference. If you simplify too much, you lose what matters. If you're clear, people understand exactly what's at stake. I walked over to the whiteboard and started outlining the flow for the briefing. Entry point, system overview, case data, operational impact. Then open questions. No wasted time, no filler. That's how we ran things. I capped the marker and stepped back. Clean, direct. Exactly how it needed to be. A knock came at the door. "Ma'am, come in." Captain Reyes stepped inside holding a tablet. "We just got confirmation from the Walter Reed team," she said. "They're finalizing their schedule for the 27th. Any changes?" "Not on our end. Same time, same lineup. They're bringing in one additional observer, but that's it." I nodded. "Good. Keep everything else as planned." "Yes, ma'am." She hesitated for half a second, then added, "The lead consultant. Dr. Park has a strong reputation. He's done a lot of work with post-op cardiac monitoring." "I've seen his profile," I said. "From what I've heard, he's detail-oriented. Asks a lot of questions." "That's fine." She gave a small nod. "We'll be ready." "I know." She left, closing the door quietly behind her. I glanced back at the whiteboard. Detail-oriented. Asks a lot of questions. That usually meant one of two things. Either someone was trying to understand how something actually worked, or they were trying to find where it didn't. Either way, it didn't change anything on my end. The system would speak for itself. It always did. I sat back down and pulled up his file. Basic background. Education. Residency. Publications. Recent work with military-affiliated hospitals. Solid track record. Nothing surprising. No red flags. Just someone who was good at what he did. That part at least made things simple. I closed the file and turned back to my own notes. Outside the base moved like it always did. Vehicles passing through checkpoints. Personnel moving between buildings. Routine that didn't need to be explained. Inside, everything stayed controlled. Predictable. The kind of environment where you knew what was expected of you. No guessing. No shifting standards. Just performance. My phone buzzed again. I didn't pick it up right away. When I did, it wasn't Brittany this time. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. If it mattered, they'd leave a message. Most people did. I set the phone back down and kept working. An hour passed, then another. By the time I checked the time, the sun was already starting to drop. I packed up a few files, stacked them neatly on the corner of the desk, and shut everything down. No rush, no lingering, just the end of another workday. As I reached for my keys, my eyes landed on the calendar again, still open on the screen. December 27th, consultation, DOD. Medical program. Lead doctor, Kevin Park. 3 days. That was all. Not a long wait. Not enough time for anything to really change, which was fine. Nothing needed to. I turned off the lights, stepped out of the office, and locked the door behind me. The hallway was quieter now. Most people had already left. A couple of enlisted soldiers passed by, nodding as they went. "Ma'am." "Evening." Simple routine. Respect that didn't need to be earned in conversation. Just understood. I headed toward the exit, the weight of the day settling into something steady. Not heavy, not light, just there. The kind of feeling you get when everything is exactly where it's supposed to be. Outside, the air was colder. Clear. The kind of cold that wakes you up a little no matter how long your day's been. I walked across the lot toward my car keys in hand, already thinking through the next day's schedule. Same structure. Same priorities. No surprises. At least that's how it looked on paper. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment before starting the engine, going over the meeting details again in my head without even trying. Same time, same room, same objective. Nothing complicated about it. Still, something about seeing his name there had shifted how the whole thing felt. Not the meeting itself. That part stayed the same. Just the context around it. I started the car and pulled out of the lot, merging into the slow stream of traffic leaving the base. Headlights stretched ahead in a steady line, everyone heading back to whatever version of normal they had waiting. For me, that meant a quiet apartment, a couple of unread reports, and a calendar that didn't leave much room for anything else. Which at this point was exactly how I liked it. By the time I got home, it was already dark. I dropped my bag by the door, loosened the collar of my uniform, and headed straight for the kitchen. Nothing fancy, just something quick, something that didn't require thinking. The TV stayed off. Silence worked better. I sat at the small table near the window plate in front of me, phone off to the side. No notifications worth checking. No messages that mattered. That part didn't bother me. What stuck with me wasn't the absence of messages. It was how easy it had been for them to decide I didn't belong there. Not a long discussion, not a back and forth, just a quick call. A decision made without me. And that was that. I finished eating, cleaned up, and walked back into the living room, picking up the folder I'd brought home. I didn't need to review it again, but habits don't really turn off just because the workday ends. I flipped through the pages anyway. Program structure. Integration phases. Expected outcomes. Everything lined up. Everything ready. Kevin Park was just another name on that list. At least that's how I treated it. No adjustments, no special preparation. If anything, I made a point of keeping it exactly the same. Because the moment you start changing things for one person, you're not running a system anymore, you're reacting. And reacting leads to mistakes. I wasn't going to do that. I set the folder down and leaned back, letting the room settle into that same quiet rhythm I was used to. No distractions, no noise, just space to think. And for a second, I let my mind go back to the call again. Not the words themselves, the tone, the certainty. Brittany hadn't hesitated. She didn't sound unsure. She didn't sound like she was asking. She sounded like she was making a correction. Like removing me from the situation was just part of making everything work better. That part was interesting, because it meant she wasn't worried about how I'd react. She already knew, or at least she thought she did. I picked up my phone again, not to call her, just to check one thing. Kevin's name. I searched it this time instead of just relying on the internal file. Public information, articles, mentions, professional profiles. He showed up exactly where you'd expect. Publications, interviews, conference appearances. Nothing exaggerated, nothing flashy, just consistent. That part I respected. People who were good at what they didn't need to over-explain it. They just showed up. I scrolled a little further. Photos from events, panels, hospital settings. Then one from a couple of weeks ago. Same one Brittany had reposted. Dinner, same outfit, same expression. Everything lined up. That made things simpler. I locked the phone and set it down again. No surprises there. Which meant the only variable in the situation wasn't him. It was how Brittany had presented everything. What she'd said, what she hadn't. And more importantly, what she expected to happen when those two versions met. I stood up and walked over to the window. The city was quiet at this hour. A few lights still on in neighboring buildings, but most people had already shut things down for the night. Normal rhythm. Predictable. That word again. Predictable. In my world, that was the good thing. In hers, it probably wasn't. She liked things that could be shaped, adjusted, improved on the surface. Image-driven. Flexible. This wasn't that kind of situation. I walked back to the desk and opened the laptop one more time, pulling up the full attendee list for the meeting. Names I recognized, a few I didn't. Roles clearly defined. Everyone there for a reason. No one extra. No room for improvisation. That was intentional. Every person in that room would either contribute or observe. Nothing in between. I scanned through Kevin's role again. Lead consultant. That meant he'd be asking questions, pushing on weak points, looking for gaps. Good. That's how it should be. If the system held up under that kind of pressure, it held up anywhere. If it didn't, I needed to know that too. I closed the laptop and finally let myself step away from it. No more reviewing. No more thinking through scenarios. Everything that needed to be done was already done. The rest would happen the way it was supposed to. I turned off the lights and headed toward the bedroom, the day settling into something quiet and steady again. No unresolved decisions. No second guessing. Just a schedule that was already in motion. 3 days. That was all it came down to. And nothing about that timeline needed to change. I woke up before my alarm, already aware of the date before I even checked the time. Christmas Eve. No notifications, no messages, no "are you still coming" texts. That part was settled. I got up, made coffee, and kept the routine exactly the same. Same pace, same habits. No adjustments just because the calendar said something different. Outside the base was quieter than usual, but not empty. It never was. Some people had leave. Some didn't. Some chose to stay. I fell into that last category, not because I had nowhere else to go, because I wasn't going where I wasn't wanted. I pulled on a jacket and headed out, the air colder than it had been the night before. Clear sky, sharp wind, the kind that makes everything feel more defined. Inside the main building, a few decorations had gone up. Nothing excessive, just enough to acknowledge the holiday without pretending everything stopped. A small tree near the entrance. A couple of strings of lights. That was about it. I grabbed a coffee from the machine near the operations room and leaned against the counter for a minute, watching the shift change come through. Different faces, same rhythm. One of the sergeants walked by, gave a quick nod. "Morning, ma'am." "Morning." No small talk, no questions. Just acknowledgement. That was enough. By mid-morning, I was back in my office going through routine checks. A couple of minor updates from the pilot sites. Nothing critical. Exactly how you want it. At some point, I picked up my phone without thinking. The screen lit up. Multiple notifications. All from the same place. Brittany's profile. I hesitated for half a second, then opened it. She had posted again. This time it was the full setup. Dining table, decorations, candles, everything arranged like it had been planned for weeks. Which it probably had. Kevin was there sitting next to her. My parents across the table. Everyone dressed like they were about to be photographed, which they were. Caption: Christmas Eve with the people who matter. Simple, clean, final. The comments were exactly what you'd expect. So beautiful. Perfect family. You guys look amazing. No one asking where I was. No one noticing anything missing. From the outside, there was nothing missing. That was the point. I zoomed in slightly on the photo. My mom was smiling the way she always did in pictures controlled, composed. My dad looked relaxed. Brittany leaned slightly toward Kevin like she was anchoring the frame around him. Everything centered exactly where she wanted it. I locked the phone and set it down. No reaction. No anger. Just confirmation. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a decision. And not just hers. I leaned back in my chair, letting that settle in. Then I got back to work. By early afternoon, things slowed down again. Most of the base had shifted into minimal operations. Enough to keep things running, not enough to fill every hour. Captain Reyes stopped by again. "Ma'am, a few of us are grabbing dinner later." Nothing formal. Just something small in the common room. "You're welcome to join." I looked up from the screen. "What time?" 1900. I nodded. "I'll stop by." She gave a small smile. "Good. It'll be low-key." Low-key is fine. She left, and the office went quiet again. I spent the next couple of hours reviewing final notes for the upcoming consultation. Not because I needed to memorize anything, but because it helped keep everything sharp. Details matter, especially when someone is coming in specifically to test them. Around 6:45, I shut everything down and headed out. The common room wasn't far. A handful of people were already there when I walked in. Nothing elaborate, just food, a couple of folding tables, some background music low enough that no one had to raise their voice. Reyes waved me over. "Glad you came, ma'am." Wouldn't miss it. I grabbed a plate and found a spot near the edge of the group. Conversation moved easily. Nothing forced. Work stories. A few jokes. Someone complaining about leave getting delayed. Another talking about family back home without turning it into anything heavy. No one asked why I wasn't somewhere else. No one needed an explanation. At one point, one of the younger officers, new, probably still figuring things out, looked at me and asked, "Ma'am, you ever get used to missing holidays?" I thought about it for a second. "You get used to knowing why you're where you are," I said. "That helps." He nodded like that made sense. Because it did. Out here, things were clear. You knew what mattered. You knew where you stood. And more importantly, you knew who you could rely on. I stayed for a while, long enough to finish eating, long enough to let the noise settle into something comfortable. Then I stepped out. The night air hit harder this time, colder, quieter. I walked back toward my car, hands in my pockets, the base light stretching out ahead of me. No calls, no messages, no last-minute change of plans. Just a clean break from something that, looking back, had already been drifting for a while. I got home, dropped my keys on the counter, and didn't bother turning anything on. No TV, no music. Just the quiet. I sat down for a minute, letting the day replay in pieces. The call, the photo, the dinner. None of it felt dramatic anymore. Just clear. I reached for my phone one more time, not to check her profile, just to look at the calendar again. December 27th. Consultation, DOD, medical program. Lead doctor, Kevin Park. Still there. Still unchanged. I locked the screen and set the phone down. Nothing about that meeting had anything to do with tonight. And that's exactly how it was going to stay. The first thing I did that morning was check the briefing room setup before anyone else got there. Not because I didn't trust my team, because details matter more on days like this. The room was already prepped. Screens tested. Files loaded. Seating arranged exactly how it needed to be. No guesswork. No adjustments once people walked in. I stood there for a second, scanning everything out of habit. Nothing out of place. Good. By 800, the building was fully active again. The quiet from Christmas had disappeared overnight, replaced with the normal pace-controlled, steady, predictable. I walked back to my office, set my folder down, and pulled up the final schedule. Arrival window 0930. Security check at the gate. Escort to main building. Briefing at 1000. Everything timed down to the minute. That wasn't overkill. That was standard. A knock at the door. "Ma'am, come in." Reyes stepped in again, tablet in hand. "Visitor team just cleared the gate," she said. "They're on schedule. Any issues?" "None reported." "Good." She paused for a second. "Escort team's bringing them in now." I nodded once. "Let me know when they're in the building." "Yes, ma'am." She turned and left. I didn't follow. There was no need. Part of leadership is knowing when to step in and when to let the system run. This was one of those moments. I stayed where I was, reviewing a set of notes I'd already gone through twice. Not because I needed to memorize anything, because repetition sharpens focus. And today wasn't a day for distractions. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. Reyes again. "They're in the building." "Understood." I stood up, adjusted my jacket, and took a second to settle into that familiar mindset. Clear. Direct. Nothing personal. Just the job. I stepped out into the hallway. Movement was steady. A couple of enlisted personnel passed by, giving the usual acknowledgement. "Ma'am." "Morning." Routine didn't change just because something unusual was about to happen. That was the point of it. As I walked toward this briefing room, I could already see the escort team approaching from the far end of the hall. 2 officers leading, 3 visitors behind them. Even from a distance, I could tell who was who. You get used to reading people quickly in this environment. The first one, older, composed, likely administrative lead. The second, mid-40s, observant, probably part of the evaluation team. And then him, Kevin. Same posture, same controlled confidence I'd seen in the photos. No hesitation in his walk. No sign that anything about this situation was out of the ordinary. Why would there be? From his perspective, this was just another consultation. Another system to review. Another meeting on a schedule. He hadn't been given any reason to think otherwise. I stopped a few feet short of the briefing room entrance and waited. No rush. No need to intercept. The escort team reached the door first. Reyes was already there, stepping forward to greet them. "Good morning," she said. "Welcome. We'll get started shortly." Professional. Efficient. Exactly how it should be. Kevin nodded, returning the greeting. His attention moved briefly around the space, taking in details without lingering. Observing. Evaluating. That part matched the file. Reyes gestured toward the room. "You can head inside. We'll begin in a few minutes." They stepped in. I stayed where I was. Not hidden, just not announced yet. There's a timing to these things. You don't walk in early. You don't create unnecessary movement. You enter when it matters. I took a breath and pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room quieted slightly. Not dramatically. Just enough. Everyone looked up. Reyes straightened slightly. "Ma'am." That was all it took. The tone shifted. Not because of anything I said, because of what that word meant in that room. Kevin's attention moved toward me. At first, it was just another glance, processing, placing. Then it paused. Just for a second. Long enough to recognize something. Not fully. Not yet. But enough to register that this wasn't what he expected. I walked to the front of the room, set my folder down, and looked over the group. No reaction. No acknowledgement of anything outside the context of the meeting. "Good morning," I said. Calm. Neutral. Standard. Reyes stepped slightly to the side. "This is Lieutenant Colonel Carter," she said. "She leads the program." No emphasis. No build-up. Just a fact. And that was enough. Kevin didn't move right away. His expression didn't change dramatically. But the shift was there. Subtle. Controlled. The kind of reaction you only notice if you're looking for it. And I was. He knew the name. Not from this setting. From somewhere else. He just hadn't connected it yet. I didn't give him time to process it. "Let's get started," I said, gesturing toward the screen. The lights dimmed slightly as the presentation came up. Structure took over. Flow replaced distraction. This was the part I controlled. Introduction. Overview. System objectives. Everything delivered the same way it always was. Clear. Direct. No extra explanation. No hesitation. Kevin sat still, eyes forward. But his attention wasn't just on the screen anymore. It shifted back to me more than once, trying to align what he was seeing with something that didn't quite match. That was fine. He'd figure it out. Everyone does eventually. I moved into the next section without slowing down. Data points, case outcomes, operational improvements, each one backed by something real. Not theory, not projections. Results. The room stayed quiet. No interruptions, no side conversations, just focus. That was the standard. About 20 minutes in, I opened the floor for initial questions. The older man spoke first. Clarifications. Timeline. Implementation scale. Straightforward. Then the second. More technical. Integration concerns. Handled. Then Kevin. He didn't rush into it. Waited a second longer than the others. Then leaned forward slightly. When you say early detection thresholds, he began, what margin are you working with before clinical symptoms typically appear? There it was. Detail-oriented. Just like Reyes said. On average, between 4 to 6 hours, I answered. Depending on the condition and data consistency. He nodded slowly. Processing. Matching that against what he knew. Do you have case-specific breakdowns for that? We do. I tapped the screen, pulling up the next set of slides. Real cases. Real timelines. No gaps. No guesswork. As the data came up, his attention locked in fully. The confusion was still there, but now it had competition. Professional interest. And that tends to win out at least for a while. I continued through the presentation, steady pace, no deviation, no acknowledgement of anything outside that room. Because inside that room, none of it mattered. Not Christmas. Not Brittany. Not what had been said. Just the system. Just the work. And just the fact that for the first time he was sitting in a place where none of those outside narratives applied. I tapped the next slide without breaking eye contact with the room. Case timelines replaced the overview. Clean charts, timestamps, intervention windows. No filler, just evidence. This case came out of our pilot site in Texas, I said. Post-op cardiac patient. Initial vitals were stable. No immediate red flags. I let the data sit on the screen. 6 hours later, the system flagged a pattern change. Not enough to trigger a standard alert, but enough to escalate internally. I clicked again. Intervention team stepped in early. Outcome stabilized. No escalation to emergency response. No reaction from most of the room. But Kevin was watching differently now. Not just listening, tracking, comparing, trying to line up what he knew with what he was seeing. That's usually the moment when people shift from polite interest to actual attention. I moved through the next case, then another. Different locations. Same pattern. Early detection. Narrow margins. Better outcomes. No exaggeration. No inflated claims. Just results. When I paused, Kevin spoke again. You're running this across multiple sites already. Yes. How many active locations? Currently 12. Expanding to 20 by next quarter. He nodded once, absorbing that. And you're standardizing across all of them. That's the goal. There was a slight pause. Not from me. From him. A hesitation that hadn't been there earlier. Like something still didn't fit. That was fine. People tend to catch up in layers. I stepped back slightly from the screen. Let's take a short break, I said. 5 minutes. Chairs shifted. Quiet conversation started. Nothing loud. Professional. Kevin didn't stand right away. He stayed seated for a second longer than the others, then finally pushed his chair back and walked toward the side of the room. Not toward the exit. Toward me. I was already gathering a few papers when he stopped a few feet away. Close enough for a private conversation. Not close enough to draw attention. Can I ask you something, he said. Direct. No small talk. Go ahead. He glanced briefly toward the rest of the room, then back at me. You're Brittany's sister. Not a question. A statement. I didn't react. Yes, that was all. No explanation, no build-up. Just confirmation. He exhaled slightly like he'd been holding that thought in place and finally let it land. I thought... He stopped himself, then reset. She told me you worked in administration. Something low level. I let that sit for a second. She said a lot of things, I said. His expression tightened, not dramatically, just enough to show the shift. And she said you weren't coming to Christmas because you had to work. I did have work, I said. That's not what I meant. I know. He looked at me for a moment, trying to piece together how those two versions existed at the same time. Then his eyes moved briefly toward the wall behind me. The framed documents, the insignia, the kind of details that don't mean much until they suddenly do. When he looked back, the confusion had changed. Less uncertainty, more clarity. She said your life was complicated, he added carefully. I almost smiled at that. That's one way to put it. He didn't smile back. Why didn't you say anything, he asked. About what? About this. He gestured lightly around the room. The office, the setup, Everything. I didn't answer right away. Not because I needed time, because the answer wasn't complicated. It wasn't relevant, I said. To her, maybe not, he said. But I cut in calm. You came here to evaluate a system, I said. That's what matters in this room. He held my gaze for a second, then nodded, because he understood exactly what that meant. Not just the words, the boundary. Personal didn't belong here, not unless I allowed it to. And I wasn't. Right, he said. Of course. There was a brief pause, then quieter, almost to himself. She didn't tell me any of this. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He already knew that. Reyes called out from across the room. We're ready to resume, ma'am. I gave a short nod. Kevin stepped back without another word and returned to his seat. The room settled again. Conversation stopped. Chairs aligned. Focus snapped back into place. I moved to the front without hesitation. Let's continue, I said. The next section loaded. Integration protocols. How the system connected with existing infrastructure. Where it adapted. Where it didn't. No assumptions. No shortcuts. Kevin asked more questions this time. Sharper. More precise. Not distracted anymore. Fully engaged. That shift mattered, because it meant whatever he'd just realized wasn't overriding his judgment. It was refining it. That's the difference between someone who reacts and someone who adjusts. We moved through the rest of the material without interruption. No one rushed. No one dragged anything out. Just steady progress from one point to the next. At the end, I closed the presentation and looked over the group. Any final questions? The older consultant shook his head. Nothing from me, he said. This is solid. The second followed. Same here. Kevin didn't answer right away. He glanced once more at the screen, then back at me. No, he said finally. I'm good. Not casual. Not dismissive. Just certain. All right, I said. We'll follow up with next steps once your team completes the review. Chairs shifted again. Papers gathered. The meeting ended the way it started. Clean. Controlled. No extra noise. People began to file out one by one. Reyes stayed back for a moment, giving a quick nod before stepping out as well. Kevin lingered. Of course he did. He waited until the room cleared, then walked back toward me. No hesitation this time. No uncertainty. Just a different kind of focus. And a completely different understanding of where he was standing. I stacked the remaining papers into a neat pile and slid them into the folder without looking up. You had more questions, I said. It wasn't a guess. Kevin gave a short nod. Yeah. No hesitation this time. No trying to ease into it. Just direct. That system you built, he said, it's not just monitoring. It's predicting failure patterns before they fully show up. It identifies trends, I said. What you do with that information still matters. That's not a standard setup, he continued. Most places don't operate like this. I'm aware. He let out a small breath, not frustrated, just recalibrating. Who designed the framework, he asked. I did. That answer landed differently than the others. You could see it. Not shock. Not disbelief. Just a quiet recalculation of everything he thought he understood walking into that building. And you're overseeing all of it, he added. Yes, across multiple locations, multiple teams, different systems that weren't built to talk to each other until we made them. I didn't say that part. He didn't need the full breakdown. He already had enough. Kevin glanced briefly at the wall again at the framed documents he'd barely registered before, then back at me. She said you kept things simple, he said. There was a pause after that, like he was deciding how much to say out loud. I didn't help him. He finished the thought on his own. That you didn't really have much going on. I closed the folder and set it aside. That's one interpretation. He let out a short, humorless breath. Yeah, he said. Not an accurate one. Number. The room was quiet now. Not awkward. Just still. Kevin shifted his weight slightly, then looked back toward the door where the rest of his team had already left. They're going to want a full report, he said. They'll get one, and it's going to be positive. That depends on your evaluation. It doesn't, he said. That was the first time his tone changed. Not unprofessional. Just certain. I've seen enough systems to know when something works, he added. This works. I nodded once. Good. Another pause. Then more carefully, she really didn't tell me anything about this. I didn't respond right away, because there wasn't anything new to add. She told me you were struggling, he continued, that you were trying to figure things out, that you didn't really talk about your work because there wasn't much to say. I leaned slightly against the edge of the desk. That sounds like her version. He watched me for a second. You didn't correct it. It wasn't an accusation. Just an observation. No, I said. Why not? Because it didn't matter. That answer held. Not defensive. Not dismissive. Just Final. He studied that for a second. You don't seem surprised, he said. I'm not. About any of it. Number. That seemed to land harder than anything else, because it meant this wasn't new. Not to me. He nodded slowly like he was starting to understand something beyond just the situation in front of him. Does your family know? He asked. They know I'm in the army. That's not what I meant. I know. Another pause. They just never asked the right questions, I added. He didn't respond to that right away, because there wasn't an easy way to. People don't usually realize what they've missed until it's already clear. And by then the moment to ask has passed. Kevin ran a hand lightly along the back of his neck, thinking. Then he looked back at me. I'm going to be honest, he said. This is not what I expected walking in here today. I figured. That's an understatement. I almost smiled at that. He let out a breath, then straightened slightly, shifting back into a more formal posture. The system is solid, he said again. And the way you're running it, that's not easy to scale. No, it's not. But you've done it. Yes. He nodded. Respect this time wasn't implied. It was clear. Not exaggerated. Not forced. Just there. That's how it works in environments like this. No one cares what you say you are. They care what you can prove. And once you've proven it, the rest doesn't need to be explained. Kevin glanced toward the door again, then back at me. I'll send my report by the end of the week, he said. That works. He hesitated for half a second. Then quieter. I need to have a conversation with Brittany. I didn't react. That's your call. It is. Another pause. Then he gave a short nod like something had settled into place. Thank you for walking me through everything, he said. Of course. He turned to leave, then stopped just before reaching the door, not turning back fully, just enough to speak. For what it's worth, he added, you're not what she described. I didn't answer. Not because I disagreed, because it didn't matter. What she said had already done what it was going to do. Kevin gave a final nod and stepped out. The door closed behind him. Silence again. I stayed where I was for a second, then reached for the folder and tucked it back into place. No rush, no shift in pace, just the end of a meeting. I walked back to the desk, sat down, and pulled up the next item on the schedule. Emails waiting, follow-ups to send. Same workflow as always. Outside that room, everything continued exactly the same. Inside it, nothing had changed either, not in a way that affected the work. And that was the only part that mattered. I typed out a quick summary for Reyes confirming the next steps and timelines. Clear, direct, no extra commentary. A few minutes later, she knocked lightly and stepped in. How'd it go? She asked. Smooth, I said. Any issues? Number. She nodded, satisfied. Figured as much. She paused for a second, then added, that lead consultant. He asked a lot more questions toward the end. He did. Good questions. Yes. She gave a small smile. That's always a good sign. It is. She turned to leave, then stopped. Ma'am. Yeah. Whatever you built here, it's making a difference. I looked at her for a second. I know. She nodded once and stepped out. The door closed again. I leaned back slightly, letting the quiet settle. Not heavy, not light, just steady. The way things are when everything is exactly where it's supposed to be. I reached for my phone without thinking. No new messages, no missed calls, nothing from Brittany, nothing from anyone at home. That part stayed exactly the same, and for once it didn't feel like something that needed to change. I set the phone back down and turned to my screen, opening the next report without giving it much thought. For about 10 minutes, everything stayed exactly the same. Emails, data, routine. Then the phone buzzed. Once, I ignored it. Again, and again. That was new. I glanced at the screen. Brittany. Of course. I let it ring. It stopped. Then a message came through. Call me. Now. I didn't. Another one followed almost immediately. What did you say to him? I leaned back slightly in the chair, reading it again. Not what happened. Not is everything okay. Straight to accusation. That tracked. I went back to the report. 2 minutes later, the phone rang again. Same name. Same urgency. I picked it up this time, not because I felt like talking, but because letting it keep ringing would be more disruptive than ending it quickly. What is it? Her voice came in fast, sharper than before. What did you do? Nothing. Don't do that, she snapped. He just called me. Out of nowhere. Asking questions. Saying things that don't make sense. That sounds like something you should talk to him about. I am talking to him, she said. I'm talking to you too. What did you tell him? The truth, I said. There was a brief silence, then louder. What truth? That I run the program he came to evaluate. Another pause. Longer this time, like the information needed a second to land. That's not, she started, then stopped. No, that's not what he said. Then you should listen more carefully. Her breathing shifted on the other end. You're twisting this, she said. You're trying to make me look bad. I didn't have to. That one landed. You think this is funny, she asked. Number. Because he's questioning everything now, she continued. Everything I told him. About you. About our family. That sounds uncomfortable. You're doing this on purpose, she said. You waited for this. You wanted this moment. I looked at the screen in front of me, still open to the same report. No, I said. I showed up to work. That's not the same thing. It is for me. She exhaled sharply, frustration bleeding through now. You could have said something, she said. You could have warned me. About what? About this, she said, struggling to find the words. About what you actually do. About your rank. About everything. You never asked. I shouldn't have to ask, she snapped. You're my sister. That goes both ways. Silence again. This time heavier. Then she shifted. You knew how important this was to me, she said, tone changing softer but more controlled. You knew I was trying to build something serious with him. I didn't interfere with that. You did by not telling him the truth, she said. You made me look like I was lying. You were. That ended the softer tone. You don't get to judge me, she said quickly. Not when you hide everything about your life. I don't hide it, I said. I just don't explain it to people who don't care to understand. I care, she insisted. No, I said. You care about how things look. She didn't respond right away, because there wasn't an easy way to argue with that. You always do this, she said finally. You make everything about being right instead of just helping. Helping how? By supporting me, she said. By not making things harder. I didn't make anything harder, I said. I didn't change anything. The situation changed when reality didn't match what you told him. That's your fault, she said. No, I said. It's not. Her voice tightened. You think you're better than me now, she said. I didn't say that. You don't have to, she shot back. It's obvious. I didn't answer, not because I agreed, because the conversation had already reached the point where logic didn't matter. She filled the silence herself. He's rethinking everything she said. Do you understand that everything? Yes. And you're just okay with that. I'm not involved in it. You are, she said. You're the reason it's happening. I'm the reason the truth exists, I said. Not the reason it's a problem. That one hit harder than the others. There was no immediate response, just breathing on the other end of the line, then quieter but sharper. You always do this. Do what? You act like you're above it, she said. Like none of this affects you. I glanced at the desk at the work still open in front of me. It doesn't affect my job, I said. That's not what I mean. I know. Another pause. Then more controlled now. He's coming over tonight, she said. We're going to talk. That makes sense. And if this falls apart, she added, that's on you? I didn't respond to that. There wasn't anything useful to say. She waited. Then when I didn't answer, she hung up. The line went quiet. I set the phone down and looked back at the screen. Same report. Same numbers. Nothing had changed there. I picked up where I left off, reading through the next section without rushing. A few minutes later, another message came through. Not from Brittany. From my mom. Call me when you can. I didn't. Not immediately. I finished the report first. Flagged 2 issues. Sent a follow-up to Reyes. Routine. Then I leaned back, letting the silence settle again. The difference now was noticeable. Not louder. Just shifting. Like something that had been stable had started to move. Not in my space, but somewhere connected to it. I reached for the phone again, opened the message, read it once more. Call me when you can. No urgency. No explanation. Just that. I locked the screen and set it back down, then went back to work. I let the message sit for a while before picking up the phone. Not out of hesitation. Just timing. There's a difference between avoiding a conversation and choosing when to have it. I finished one more email, closed the last open file, then leaned back and tapped her name. She answered on the second ring. Hi, sweetheart. Her voice was careful. Softer than usual. Controlled. Hi, Mom. A short pause. I didn't want to bother you at work, she said. I just wanted to check in. You already did, I said. You sent a message. I know, She stopped herself. Things are a little tense here. I can imagine. Another pause. Brittany said you spoke to Kevin, she said. We were in the same meeting. That's not what I meant. I know. She exhaled quietly. He told her some things, she said. About your job. I didn't tell him anything he didn't already see. That's what I'm trying to understand, she said. What exactly does he think you do? I leaned forward slightly, resting my arms on the desk. He thinks I lead the program he came to evaluate. Silence. Then slower this time. You lead it. Yes. Not assist or help coordinate. Number. Another pause. Longer. He said you're in charge, she added. That's correct. I could almost hear her trying to reorganize what she thought she knew. That's not how you've ever described it, she said. You never asked me to. That's not fair, she said quickly. We've asked about your job. You've asked what it's called, I said. Not what it means. That landed. Not hard. Just clearly. I didn't realize. She started then stopped. I know. She was quiet for a few seconds. Then carefully, Brittany feels like you embarrassed her. I let that sit. I didn't do anything to her, I said. She says you could have explained things ahead of time. She could have asked. That's not the same thing. It is if you want the truth. Another pause. She didn't think it mattered, my mom said. I know. That doesn't make it right, she added quickly. No, I said. It doesn't. Her tone shifted slightly. Less defensive. More uncertain. He's upset, she said. Kevin. That makes sense. He said there were things she told him that don't match what he saw. That also makes sense. She let out a small breath. I think she was just trying to make everything look good, she said. You know how she is? Yes. That doesn't mean she was trying to hurt you. I didn't say she was. But you sound like you think that. I looked at the wall in front of me at the same framed photos I'd seen 100 times. I think she made a choice, I said. And that choice had consequences. She didn't expect this, my mom said. That's the problem. Silence again, then softer. We didn't either. I didn't respond, because that part was true. They didn't expect it. They didn't expect me to say okay. They didn't expect me to not push back. They didn't expect anything outside of what they were used to. I'm sorry, she said finally. Not rushed, not forced, just there, for what I asked. For how we handled things, she said. For asking you not to come. For not thinking it through. I let that sit for a second. I appreciate that, I said. You deserved better, she added. That one was new. I didn't rush to respond. Not because I disagreed. Because I wanted to be clear. You didn't respect me when you thought I had nothing, I said. She didn't interrupt. Didn't try to soften it. And now that you know more, I continued. That doesn't just erase that. I know, she said quietly. I'm not angry, I added. But I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen. That's fair. Another pause. We'd like to see you, she said. Soon. When things settle down. I'll think about it. Not a yes, not a no. Just the truth. She accepted that. Okay, she said. That's okay. We stayed on the line for a few more seconds. Nothing else needed to be said. I should let you get back to work, she added. All right. I love you. I know. She hung up first. The room went quiet again. Same as before. But not the same. I set the phone down and looked at the screen in front of me. Work still waiting. Emails still coming in. Nothing about that had changed. I picked up where I left off. Same pace. Same focus. A few minutes later, another notification came through. This time from Brittany. Just one line. He's not coming back. No explanation. No blame. No follow-up. I read it once, then locked the screen. No reply. There wasn't anything to add. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence settle one more time. Not heavy. Not empty. Just clear. Outside the base moved the same way it always did. People walking past. Doors opening and closing. Routine holding everything in place. Inside, nothing felt unfinished. No loose ends. No unresolved questions. Just a line that had finally been drawn where it should have been a long time ago. I turned back to the screen and kept working. Exactly where I belonged. I didn't get a second call from her after that. Not that day, not the next. And that was fine, because for the first time things felt settled. Not fixed, not perfect, just clear. I used to think respect came from explaining yourself enough times until people finally understood. That if you just showed them more, said it better, made it easier, they'd see you differently. That's not how it works. People decide how they see you long before they actually know you. And sometimes they only change their mind when reality forces them to. Not because you argued. Not because you proved anything. Just because they couldn't ignore it anymore. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to prove a point. I didn't need revenge. All I did was show up where I was supposed to be. And let the truth do the rest. That was enough. If this story hit a little too close to home, if you've ever been judged, dismissed, or underestimated by your own family, then you already understand what this was really about. These kinds of family drama and family revenge stories aren't about getting even. They're about knowing your worth before anyone else does. If you want more real stories like this, military stories, family conflict, quiet comebacks that actually feel real, go